Hello, Internet! Scoot over, Pete. I'm a big person. Well, if you're watching this, you are watching yet another episode of Pop Culture Uncovered. We are back here at Fantom Comics, conveniently located at 2010 P Street Northwest, Washington, D.C. And we're going to discuss Watchmen today.
What?
Apparently, the question of who watches the Watchmen has been solved. We watched all of it.
I don't watch none of it. I hate it all. Every single bit.
So, watched all of it minus the episode that drops tonight. I'm sorry, not tonight. Tomorrow night. Tomorrow night at 9 p.m. So, I mean, hey, so let's get started. Unless you've been living under a pop culture rock for the last, I don't know, 20, 30 years, to have missed Watchmen either in comic book form or in movie form, that would have had to have been a remarkable feat of avoidance. Watchmen, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say, is probably the Bible of comic books in terms of complexity and depth. It's one of Alan Moore's most seminal works. While I personally would argue that V for Vendetta is a more profound and better story, and I would have liked to have seen an HBO series out of that more than this. Seeing what Regina King did with it, you know, I stand.
V for Vendetta don't
right.
have Natalie Portman in it.
That's a conversation for another day. But so, Watchmen, of course, was the original 1986 miniseries, 12-issue miniseries that was based upon the Charleston characters, which were Nightshade, Captain Atom, Dr. Spectrum, and The Question. And they weren't given the authorization to use those characters that the DC acquired them and told them they would be able to use them. So they created, analogous characters to be able to tell the story forward. And the original miniseries basically ended with a cliffhanger. So the world had been... So for anyone who hasn't read the book and who hasn't watched the show, I guess I should say... Spoilers!
Why are you here?
The original series ends with humanity having been tricked into believing that there was an alien attack on the planet, which has thus caused the various nations of the earth to avoid thermonuclear war. So we leave there. And I should say, and it involves a giant squid. And I should say that because if you, like me, made the mistake of going to watch the Watchmen movie before watching the show, you realize they're two different things. Kind of similar, but the Watchmen HBO television show follows the comic book and not the movie, and I think that's a big distinction. So just first, I kind of want to ask you guys: have all of you read Watchmen? Like Najee, have you read Watchmen front to back before?
Mm-hmm. Last time I read it front to back, beyond like getting prepared for the show, like a decade ago. It's one of those stories that's like, I don't necessarily want to revisit this. I revisit the movie a lot because it's easier to digest. That actually, the motion comic is easier to digest because you can watch it, you know? You can actually watch it. I'm going to exit out. I'll see you guys.
Yeah, well, reading it in preparation for the show was my first time reading it. I enjoyed it. It shocked me a little bit when I first got into it because I was one of those people who must have been under that rock. This is really my first exposure to Watchmen, so I definitely wasn't expecting for the political issues to be so prevalent in it. Like I thought I was really gonna have to like dig deep to try to figure out what they were talking about, but no, everything was right up front. I really enjoyed that about it though.
No, I mean, it's just interesting because, I mean, it's such a daunting book as a new reader. I mean, and I know you said you don't read comic books. So, I mean, what was that kind of experience like? Because I'm like, for people who are comic book fans, it was kind of like, I mean, look, reading Watchmen can be a chore. It's a lot of...
Well, I think just because of my background, it wasn't so much heavy lifting for me. I'm an English major and then a creative writing for entertainment master. So I've learned about writing comic books and I've had to read them for school, for assignments and things like that, but never just for my own enjoyment. So I kind of, knew what I was getting into. I wasn't completely surprised by anything when I started reading it, except, like I said, how much in the forefront all those political issues were. But it was still an enjoyable experience for me. I felt, I can't say nostalgia because I'm not a comic book reader. But when I I was reading it, I was like, oh man, like I would have loved to be reading this or be a part of this when it was first coming out, or at least sooner than this. I definitely, I probably would revisit it again because I know there's a bunch of stuff there that I missed, and I want to be able to compare it with the show.
Pete?
I read it in preparation for the movie. And then, because I had somehow, in my geekdom, I had completely missed it. Like, I would think I was just too young to have caught it when it came out. I wasn't as much a comic book person as I was a movie, sci-fi nerd. So I completely missed it, in its heyday. And then, everyone constantly references it. So then, I felt like, leading up to the movie was a great time to read it. And then, Rose and I've been reading it just to kind of catch up on the references in the show. Like, basically, she's reading the whole thing all the way through, and then she's like, look! And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's okay.
Wow, I mean, well, I'm really going to show my age. So,
7 years ago.
So I've probably been reading Watchmen since the early 90s. I became a comic book fan when DC came out with Crisis on Infinite Earths. And right after that, they put out an encyclopedia called Who's Who. For those of you on the internet who might not be familiar with the idea, there used to be these things called physical encyclopedias. And DC put out one basically for comic books. And in that, they explained the plot of Watchmen. And so from there, I was like, oh, let me get my hands on this book. And so as like an 11-year-old reading it, it was like, this doesn't seem like Superman, and there's sex and violence and dogs being hit in the head with so. But no, so I've been reading it for a really long time, and I think the interesting thing for me is how my perception of Watchmen has changed over the years as I've gotten older. When I was younger, I can tell you that I absolutely identified with Rorschach, because I was like, look, there's right and there's wrong. And the older I got, the more I was like, wow, like I did not see.
I got tricked.
I was like, I did not see, the incredibly hostile aspects of this character. I didn't see, how much of a need for conformity and how he has a very specific thought process of what is and is not acceptable in terms of human behavior, and anything that deviates outside of that is something that has to be destroyed. And I don't think I picked up as a kid on his sense of nihilism, which was like so the world's coming to the end, so all that really matters is right and wrong for as long as the planet hasn't caught on fire. And it's funny, I think I've gotten kinder towards Ozymandias. When the first reading, like, well, obviously he's a horrible human being and a villain. But it's like, but when you think like, so if somebody found out they had to do something horrible to stop climate change, which was going to make the planet, not capable of supporting human life, considering the horrible things that humanity has done over the course of its existence, how horrible is that person? Like, they're horrible, but horrible like what? Horrible like Genghis Khan? Horrible like, Sir Jeffrey Amherst giving out blankets to Native Americans knowing that there are diseases and smallpox on them? Like, how horrible would Ozymandias be? So it's just interesting. As I've grown as and gotten old, well, hopefully grown as a human being, but gotten older, it's just funny how I see the series differently than I did originally.
It's almost like the logical conclusion to taking one point of view to its complete extreme.
Yeah.
Like, it's the ends justify the means, or it's, right is right and wrong is wrong and there's no such thing as nuance, or, it's chaotic.
Yeah.
In the form of a comedian. Like, there's, a lot of... I think that was the thing that drew me to it, that I never understood with all the people who talked about The Watchmen. People talked about The Watchmen the way people, talk to me about Breaking Bad, which immediately makes me, like, not want to watch it. Like, I live in Baltimore, and every time I bring it up, someone's like, yo, you ever seen The Wire? It's so groundbreaking. I'm like, ah! And
I love The Wire.
Recoil.
I love The Wire.
I'm sure it was very groundbreaking, but so I avoided it to my own detriment. And those were the things that, like, I never realized were contained in those pages, was like, that kind of exploration of almost taking a point of view to beyond its natural conclusion to its extreme, and then putting those people on the page and kind of making you debate with yourself.
No, absolutely.
And I think the show, just to get into that, is also, I think that's the thing that I love most about the show, is it's like, in the first episode, the first thing that I thought to myself was, wow, whose side am I on? Like, the fascist police, or like the racist, anarchist, like terrorist organization with lettuce in the back of the truck. Like,
Oh no, because it reminds me of what they were talking about in the official podcast for it. And David Lindelof is talking about he had read Coats Between the World Is Me and Coats' run on Black Panther. And when we used to have the book clubs here at Fantom Comics, used to be the shameless promotion, but when we used to have that conversation here, it was, you don't know whose side you're on at first. You don't know if you're rooting for T'Challa or Zenzi or like the regular old people of Wakanda. You don't know whose side you are on. And I think that's a perfect way to make you feel that way. You could tell that how much of that is based off of what we have now in front of us, And honestly, I'm never rooting for the cops, so it's it's never ever really a thing. Now I can root for Regina King, just not the cops,
I mean, no. So I guess we'll just seeing how you guys kind of take it off. We'll just general thoughts about the show. So
Start with you, Sean.
Well, my general thoughts about the show, I really, really enjoy it a lot. I love it. I love Regina King. She's so believable. Like, there's never a moment in the show where I feel like, to me, I never felt like it was a stretch to me that she could totally just really be out here doing all this shit. Like, she's really just out here kicking ass like it's nothing. And I think one of my favorite things about how they characterized her is how efficient she is. Everything she does has a purpose, like all the way down to just already having a guy in her trunk when she gets gets to the precinct. Like, just taking him in, how quickly she gets the information out of him. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't seem like it ever takes her long to make those decisions about what's about to be necessary to get done what she needs to get done. She's just going to do it. And yeah, I think that definitely was one of my favorite things about the show, is seeing a black woman being shown that way. Like, I haven't seen anywhere where she's faltered or like done something that I didn't find to be believable.
I agree. I think my big thing about the depiction of women in film in general, especially black women, is I'm watching something, there's a moment where it's like, that's not authentic. Or it's like that. I couldn't imagine, any woman that I've grown up around or been raised by, acting like that. And my thing behind Regina King is like, we've seen her vulnerable, we've seen her hurt, we've seen her scared. But there's never a moment that she's not capable. Like, even when she's in over her head, she's like, oh, there's a way. And I thought the best moment was when Sally, played by Jean Smart, who they're sitting in that mausoleum, and it's like she's trying to put the fear of God on her. She's like, oh. I thought it was such a perfect snapshot into the character's personality, where it's like, you don't get it. The reason why I'm here is because I don't fold. I've been through, which of course we discover later on through the course of the series, she had been through bad before. So being in bad circumstances now was not going to cause her to freak out. It wasn't a place that she hadn't been before. Najee, your kind of general thoughts on the show before we get into specifics.
My heart. I love me some Regina King. And they got Regina King and Black Manta in the same place, and they married. I really don't need nothing else, honestly. But I think I really love how they handle everything. We'll get into that in a few, but it's from how it's shot to how they tell the story. It's just done really well, and it doesn't take much for. We'll get into that later, but it's done really well. And like, come on, you start the first episode with like, we're gonna. But we'll get into that later.
So, Pete, general thoughts?
Like I keep saying, it gives me the same feeling that reading the comic did. We know that Alan Moore's famously hates anything made from his property, and that's obviously his right. But at the same time, I feel like what's amazing is you finally have a creative team who has taken the theme of one of his pieces of work and understands it probably better than he understands it now, or like understands the importance of telling that kind of story. Like, to me, there's a point at which, if the show keeps going the way it does, it feels like it's going to have more of an impact on my life and my beliefs and my understanding of the world and that we live in than the comic book ever did. And that's happening right now. Like, there's things that I didn't know about, and there's things that that it's forcing me to think about stuff, both on like a, in that like heady kind of navel-gazy kind of like what does it all mean kind of way, and then also like with the historic context of like race and gender in our country.
No, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I think I'll just add that my general impression of the show, most times when somebody tries to adapt an existing work, it's the constant, well, it's going to fall short. Mm-hmm. And I feel like what the team did that was really interesting. They made a conscious decision to talk about what wasn't in the book. And race is a concept that's entirely unexplored in the book. The original story deals entirely, it's all about power dynamics. But, I mean, I think based off, again, unless you've been hiding someplace, politically, the most charged issue in human civilization right now, whether it's the United States or the United Kingdom or anywhere else, race is that dividing line where once it gets involved into the equation, the waters begin to part and people have very clear ideas of what they believe. And that dynamic is absent in the original book. So, I mean, I thought it was incredibly instructive that, they were like, well, this is where the story would go naturally. What if all the events of the world that we, the world that we come from had happened in this fictionalized world? Well, where would we be on race in the 21st century in a world where there had been costume heroes and there was a guy walking around who had the entire power of quantum mechanics in his back pocket? What would that do to the world, and how would the world look differently? Or would it not look as different as we'd like for it to? And it looks eerily similar to where we're at. Before we get too far in, I do want to talk one thing about casting. Now, Najee, you're not that much younger than me. This is the best role Louis Gossett Jr. has had since Iron Eagle.
Look, I just need my life story to be a thing because Lou Gossett Jr. looks a lot like my dad, and I need him to play my dad before, but it's.
But the casting on this show is unlikely, right? Because when you look at Louis Gossett Jr., you look at Regina King, you look at Jean Smart. Jean Smart, I remember her from Designing Women. There's no line in my brain that goes from there to here. Her on Legion was like, oh, that's interesting. This, I was like, by the time I had made it through that first episode with her in it, I was like, this has always been Sally. This is who Sally always has been. And the film didn't happen. This is all that matters to me.
Her character in Legion to me was like, wow, I'd love to see Jean Smart like this. And all of a sudden, like her in Watchmen, it's like, wow. It's miles above that, which I didn't expect, and that makes me sad. Like,
because I love that show, and I can't.
Y'all like y'all like that, but I'm gonna let y'all slide on that. Y'all can have Legion.
I love it.
That's fine. We're gonna say that for another day.
But also, when we look at Yahya Abdul-Mateen,
yes,
I want to say the second.
yes.
He also played Cadillac in The Get Down.
Yes.
He was Cadillac in The Get Down.
That's
He's also my beloved Black Manta. And he's now, like, these are completely different people. Like, he's really great at acting because they feel like, just like with Regina King, just like with Sally, like, they feel like different people. There isn't like, oh, I'm this person.
I'm Regina
and this is
but he covers Dr. Manhattan. It's such a, I was waiting for the moment where I was like, Billy Crudup's version of Dr. Manhattan in the film. I was waiting for the moment there was a break between the two. And he stepped into that role and was like, he sensed it. And it was
He's not whining, he just cried.
it's funny. He gives John a sense of humanity that was entirely absent from the film. Because he's kind of like, there's a point in the show where he's desperately kind of trying to connect with Regina King as he's trying to kind of start off their relationships for her. And it's the fact that he's like pained by like, look, I don't perceive time the way you do, but I'm very much trying to get on the same page with you because you don't get it. I'm already in love with you. And I loved it. I was like, wow. I was like, there's like a human side to Dr. Manhattan. I'm used to Dr. Manhattan just kind of just like, he's a giant floating blue penis that can do everything. So it's just kind of like, the casting, I really feel like, I had to give a tremendous amount of credit to the cabinet, to the casting directors and the casting folks, because just how they assembled this cast. Like, it was not like, let's just go get a bunch of A-list stars, which you can do because it's HBO. But they went and they took their time. So jumping into kind of some of the issues that Watchmen explores, I wanted to get into the gender. And the reason why was because the same way the original Watchmen did not deal with race, it barely touched upon gender, and when it did, only in like the most terrible aspects of it. I mean, sexual assault, and rape. There wasn't a lot of. I mean, other than we could talk about the agency of basically having had the Silk Spectre in the story. The first and the second version. Besides that, like Sally into herself in the original story, she's part of how the world gets saved in terms of, I guess, John's participation in the rest of the story. But it's not because she specifically is doing anything. It's her mere existence. So none of the female characters are really imbued with a whole lot of agency in the original story, which is I felt like on the show is a big change. Which obviously, the headline, the protagonist is. Sister Knight Regina King. So that alone puts us in a different context. Because Rorschach was basically the person who was walking us through the story in the original story. And then, instead of Ozymandias, we have Lady True. I just think the story is enriched behind the fact that gender is in play. And it is a topic for conversation. So I just wanted to ask, having read the book and now having seen the show, do you think that this... I don't know. In the attempt to try to handle gender in a more realistic, rational way, I personally thought the story was improved, even if I don't feel like it always did everything it could have done in working out those characters. What did you think?
I definitely think there was huge improvement, and I'm not expecting for it to be perfect. I don't think it ever really can be, because in that, not within gender, not everyone who identifies as male, female, whatever, is going to express their humanity or that gender in the same way. There's no way to fully encapsulate that in a show, no matter how well you cast it, how well you write it. But I do think they did a really good job, and actually one of my favorite moments where agency was like the theme in the forefront in the sense of gender and race was the moment where Sister Knight is waking up in the hospital and Judd is next to her, and in their exchange he's talking to her about what's taking place, and he tells her that it's okay for her to cry, and she's like, maybe later. I love that moment so much, first of all because Mr. White Man, like, you're not about to sit here and regulate the way I choose to express my emotions. Like, I don't need your fucking permission to cry. If I'm going to cry, I'll do it without you needing to instruct me on it. And the fact that you are a man trying to regulate my emotions, why do you feel like that's what is necessary for me to do right now in this moment? I'm fully capable of regulating that response in myself. If that's what I feel like I need to do, then I'll do it. And just the way she handled it, she didn't get upset. Like, if she did get upset, it wasn't in that angry black woman, I'm about to flip out and tear this man's head off. She just said what she had to say. She kept it short and sweet, and he got the point. Like, his smile acknowledged that. Like, he knew what that meant. He knew what that meant, and I love that. I love that moment so much.
I sat back and I was kind of amazed because, again, my thing is I'm also a creative writer. I always tell my wife is in terms of I can tell when I am not writing a character well all of a sudden the fact that she is a woman is the defining characteristic in terms of why she's in the story and what she's doing. And so the thing that I appreciated was the fact that it's like Sister Knight, you could have easily made that a male character, and I don't think that behaviorally she would have behaved any different or had any different. Because I mean, look, male characters are always prided on their ability to suppress their emotions and focus on the task at hand, right? To become emotional, like it's the cry in the bathroom hero. I've saved the whole world and I was scared the whole time. Now I will go into the bathroom and cry. I love the fact that she's like, I don't have time to freak out. There are 3 children who lost both of their parents already. I'm dealing with this. We now know that she's known the entire time that she's with Dr. Manhattan. She's like, life hasn't been normal for me ever. And freaking out, like, when literally everybody's relying on me to make good decisions. And I was like, as a dad, I was like, that's a parent. Being a parent is, you might absolutely love to fold yourself into a ball and cry. But the moment you freak, everybody else is too. So you at least have to have the illusion of, oh, it's all going to work out perfectly fine. Go ahead.
If you don't have the go to the bathroom and cry moment, then what you've made is a character who is less fully realized than the male character who does. Okay. Like, to not give her that moment to be vulnerable because we're saying, well, this empowers her, and then missing the part that empowering somebody also means allowing that character to be vulnerable in a realistic way is also a place where writers can make mistakes. And I think that was the part where in the crypt, to me, like the square off was was like, all right, I get like, I get it. Like it was more to me. It was more like audience service. And then 2, 3, 4 episodes later, when you see all the stuff she's genuinely been through, and like even as a child, the way she's like had to make that decision, like, do I crumple into a ball or do I deal with it? Then that to me made, you know, her character just feel more and more realistic as we went on. Because those earlier episodes, I was like, we've buffied her, we've made her completely infallible, and then and then you find out at the end, like, and I feel like that's where we are right now with this like second to last episode, or the one before when she's like has to go into a skull, and she's just you know, and then you see her despair, and that to me is where I love her the most in these last 2 episodes, where like she's full of despair, but she's also full of like no nonsense, like tell me what is going on and stop messing with me, like and that is the part where I felt like I could relate to being to her so much more, being in the center of chaos, being like I have a job to do, and then also at the same time like I'm trying not to lose my shit back.
But that's the thing, right? It's her. I mean, so like going back to like when the police find the puppeteer who was responsible for having given the bomb to the guy that killed her parents, when she goes, "Can I watch?"
Yeah.
I was like, now I understand how I get from here to I get to little ears. How we get from Najee.
What? I'm just saying.
But now I can understand how we get from there till we get to your sister Knight. Which I should say 2 things. One, I didn't know it in Alan Moore's original notes. Brother Knight was going to be a member of the Minutemen. So when they pull Sister Knight out, it's not like completely out of the ether. They repurposed what would have been the original character that wasn't used for the original story. And 2, I love the fact that look, being for somebody who's about Angela's age, she's in her early 40s. In a world where there are no comic book heroes, the fact that she's inspired by a black exploitation character made the most sense to me in the world. Because it's like, well, what else would you pick? You're going to look at, Uptown Saturday Night. You're going to look at Dolomite. You're going to look at Shaft. And so it's like, yeah, Sister Knight, like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Before we leave the topic, I want to make sure we talk about motherhood, because I thought what the creative team decided to do with motherhood was different. Motherhood traditionally in stories is always like, look, the female character is now, she's shackled by the responsibility of motherhood, and it restricts her ability to do all of the heroic things, or it's some sacrifice. That's how traditionally it's always used. Here, you have Sally, who's chosen not to have any children of her own, in part because of the traumatic way she's grown up. You have Angela, who initially we were like, we can't tell if she really enjoys being a mother or not, but now we know she really desperately wants to have a family, but she's basically built a family based off other people experiencing the horrible events that she has. Which, Najee, I was sitting there like, so she's like Batman, and this is her Dick Grayson and Jason Todd and everybody. And then you have Lady True, who literally is kind of like, they say there's a moment in life where you raise your parents. She's raising her mother right now. So I just kind of wanted to get your guys' thoughts, and I'll start with you, just on the nature of motherhood in this version of Watchmen.
I definitely thought it was very interesting. I appreciated the way that they did not connect motherhood so much with biology, because especially in the world that we live in, we know that that's not. It's one of the factors or one thing that makes someone a mother, but it's not the entirety of it. And the fact that none of Sister Knight's children are biologically related to her, but she loves them and she does whatever is necessary to make sure that these kids have what they want. I absolutely love her relationship with Topher. The fact that she knows what her son needs, and it really doesn't matter what someone else might think about the way that she gets him what or allows him to get what it is that he needs, because I can't think of very many mothers who are going to allow their their child to watch what Topher watches, or allow their child to be the one who announces to his little sisters that their uncle just got killed or whatever. But I really appreciated the fact that she could step out of the role of being the adult and wanting to just exercise some type of power over him, and really saw him as an equal, in the sense that you've experienced all types of, hurt and heartache just like I have. And I feel like those experiences have given you enough to be able to reason on a level that I should respect.
Mm-hmm.
I like that about motherhood because it's something that as a mom can be a struggle, especially when you've grown up and it's really always been about people having power over you until you reach a certain age or until you achieve some, social benchmark or whatever. And, I felt like there was a lot of it was a really fresh perspective to look at motherhood from. And also, when it came to Lady True raising her mom, definitely like the obvious references to aging and, having to take care of your parents as they get older. And I really like how that tied into the way she talks about when she was having the conversation with Agent Blake about why the statue of Adrian Veidt was old,
Mm-hmm.
and she was like, well, where I come from, we revere our elders, and he's older than the statue because he actually is old. And Adrian Blake's like, well, you look like shit. No, this is America. But it made me think about, how little respect we have here for our elders, even when we are in the position to kind of be their parents. We have to take care of them, and a lot of people, just kind of either, I'm not passing judgment on people who, send elders to a home or anything. That's your personal choice. But some people really do just fully opt out of caring for them at all. Or they are abusive towards them, which makes me think about the way that Lady True introduces the memories to her mother.
Yeah, the whole like, I have no problem with you experiencing the pain of your previous life, and I'm not going to try to explain or rationalize any of it for you. You just go through it.
Also with that though, you think about people who have dementia.
Yeah.
And how you would have to feed them the information. Literally have to feed them the information. I don't know, man, the way they treat parenting. Again, they do a really good job on this show because this could, if they just take one thing off, it turns into something completely horrible. And they do a really good job of this. Julian pointed this out. He was like that Angela has the story of Batman.
Oh. Yes.
That she gets to choose. She chooses who her family is. That's a good, wonderful thing. But how, even again, like the agency she has over herself at all times. Mm-hmm. It's never like, hey, we're gonna take all of this from you. And even when they try to take everything from her, it's like, yeah, I hear that, but this is me. How, just seeing motherhood in that way, like, cause it reminds me of something Lindelof talked about in the podcast. It's like, I have a good relationship with my mom. So it's much easier to write like women as full of characters for me, opposed to
his dad. Cause he was working out his dad issues when he was doing Lost.
Yeah, and even when you look at like the writers' room, it's not just all dudes in the writers' room. There are women from different walks of life, different races, and how people identify. It shows up in writing.
But
it just makes me think of like the two things that I take away from that is one. The playfulness. Like you have a mom and a son. When I feel like there's that I don't call it sink down moment. Like my dad was always really tall, so when he would bond, like when he would come into the the bedroom and be like telling jokes before he went to bed or like read a book to us, like he would come down and then he was like at that level and it was just us. It was just me and dad or my brother and me and dad, and he'd be like, we'll fill mom in later. We got jokes, we got our inside jokes, we have our inside conversations, we have our own relationship that isn't just parents unit, children unit. It's I have an individual relationship with each one of my family members. And as an adopted kid, I also like that we don't address that. Like your kids are your kids. I didn't know. I think all of us didn't know that they weren't, Angela's biological kids until like the third or fourth episode. And to me, like that's how.
I thought they weren't her kids.
Okay,
all right.
Okay, when I saw Topher, I was like, well, he might be hers. When I saw everybody else, I was like, there's an interesting story here, and I want you to finish your thought, and then I want to go back to that. Go ahead.
I don't remember seeing them. I guess is my point. So. I get it, but at the same time, like that to me, like as an adopted kid who doesn't look like his parents, like to just have parents, because I feel like in most pop culture, especially TV shows, there's the big A, like there's always that tag, and it's never let go, and it's never not like it's just always there, like over the shoulder of some character, adopt a kid, we get it, And to me, like, I don't ever think about it. I don't think about the word adopt. I go years without thinking, oh yeah, I'm adopted. Those are my parents. You know, like, aren't my biological parents, but they are. You know, and so like to just have that. And not have it be addressed in such a heavy-handed way, to me was really comforting. And so,
Shout out to Toph for punching that kid.
Oh, I mean, and I want to touch on that because I mean, the thing for me that was interesting is that I don't know that we've ever seen like a show where it was two healthy black adults are raising a group of children that do not look like them. And so for me, it was kind of like for Angela being someone who desperately wants to have family, I was kind of like, this is how family begins to transcend things. When somebody's family, you just respond to them as family. So Topher goes off because he's like, that's my mom. You were sitting and talking about my mom, and I'm in the room. So I'm going to have a response. I mean, that for me was kind of like, I'll play this, because we're going to talk about race in a second. The reason why those relationships to me were important, because it's literally, without those relationships, you're left with a lot of really horrible racial trauma and issues to deal with. And I feel like those kids and the relationship, like even after, you know, we see Cal go back to being Manhattan, he's still dad. He's like, the kids are fine, I sent them with your grandfather, you know, I didn't want them to be here for this, you know. It's the fact they're still a family. No matter how strange or weird it is that your mom is Batman and you know, and your dad's basically like Superman plus, they're still mom and dad. And what we look like doesn't matter. What matters is that we're a family and we function entirely within that. And I thought that was kind of like for a show that does not operate on a lot of hope, that was like my one hopeful nugget in the show. But, so moving on to that wonderful topic that I feel like we're compelled to discuss, which is race, I want to start off by saying there have been people who have complained. I know there was a prominent Forbes article where the author complained that he did not like the Watchmen television show because he felt like racism was too small of a concept to revolve an entire show around, which I thought was amazing because race. I understand. Race is right because race is entirely a conversation about power and power dynamics. That's literally what what the conversation surrounds. So I'm like, it seemed like it was a perfect analog for everything we were dealing with. I mean, we had the Cold War, you know, in the original Watchmen, and so there's the power dynamic between two unequal forces, right? The problem was the United States had Dr. Manhattan plus his nuclear arsenal, and the Soviet Union was basically looking at the fact that we had gone through Vietnam and we were now encroaching in Afghanistan. And so it was that power dynamic that was in play. Now we're talking about the 7th Cavalry has said that it is too difficult to be a white man in 2019 in this reality. You know, the senator says, you know, it's too hard being a white man. I think I'll be a blue one. And that's the key was like they plan on taking Manhattan's ability. So I'll just say, I don't know how Lindelof got HBO to sign off on this show.
Trojan horses.
And did he? Because I loved his underlying concept of when Black Panther was getting ready to come out, having read Between the World and Me and having read Ta-Nehisi Coates' A Case for Reparations that appeared in The Atlantic. I actually think he won, I forget what award he won. I think he won the Peabody Award for that particular article. He was like, Lindelof said he was envisioning Wakanda. And he was like, in the real world, if Wakanda had existed, somebody would have come and burned it to the ground. And he immediately took him to Tulsa. And so I was kind of like, first thing that I want to give Watchmen credit for, the Tulsa Massacre has never been depicted on film or dramatized in any way since the actual event. And it is not a well-known historical fact outside the black community. Within the black community, I can tell you as a kid who graduated from 2 HBCUs, it is a conversation that never ends because it is like the proverbial what if. It's just like what if Reconstruction doesn't end badly? Well, would we be living in the Midwest more if Tulsa hadn't fallen apart? Would we be such a bi-coastal people where it's kind of like we're on the East Coast and the West Coast and we don't go in the middle? Like there's a reason why we've depopulated the Midwest, and Tulsa was one of those big signifying things. And what I thought they were really intelligent about with race is how race is an issue that touches upon every generation of black people in this nation. The fact that they didn't say they were the Harlem Hellfighters, you knew the World War soldiers were the Harlem Hellfighters. And so it's like, if you go to the African American Smithsonian here, you see the medals they're awarded are not American medals because they were not allowed to serve with the American military, although they were American citizens. They fought, they served with France, so they had the Legion of Merit. And so it made perfect sense to me that you have a black man having returned from the First World War in Tulsa, trying to deal with, you know, all the reality that was on that flyer. I went across the world and saw people, get killed and get gassed. People forget the First World War was the first mechanized war. It's as bad as the Second World War, with the absence of the Holocaust in terms of the actual fighting conflict, is almost a more humane war than the First World War. Having come from that and fought for democracy, you come back to Tulsa, and you realize you're not free there either. And so it's like, you understand how you get to hooded justice. Because it's like, what would you do if you fought and you sacrificed? You have absolutely nothing to show for it. And you lost, as the kid, you lost everybody you cared about and your whole way of life because someone else had a problem with the way you existed. So with that as the backdrop, I kind of just want to just touch off. So what did you guys think about how Watchmen handled race from Tulsa all the way up to to Angela's time period of the 7th Cavalry?
Oh, we started with me?
Yeah, go ahead, Najee.
If they aren't careful, in which they have been, this show could have turned into a cop apologist show real quick. But again, when you talk about diversity, you have to do diversity. And what they're doing in the writer's room is diversity. And how they handle those things, one, showing it as chaotic as it is. Because most people think when you're in a firefight, when you're in any of these things, that is, oh, I'm going to be like Neo in the Matrix. That is not happening at all. It's chaotic. Everything is moving. Everything is shaking. You just got to move. You can fight or flight. You saw how many people were just standing around, and some people were moving. And how that is depicted, and really actually showing people, no, this is a very violent thing that happened. It isn't like, oh, no, this isn't. This is what they've been trying to rewrite in the Texas textbooks. These people came over to work for us. It's a very violent thing. And they don't shy away from the violent thing. But even when they show the violent thing, it isn't. Black Lightning does it really well. Where it's like, oh, we're going to have these people get killed. Like, they're going to be hung. We're not necessarily going to show them hung by their necks. We're going to show them hung by their feet. You still get the same thing. But it's like, for us watching this, for people of color, for black people especially watching it, like, it isn't that same trauma that comes with it. It's like, oh, I get to see this, and I get to see it in a way in which it doesn't necessarily hurt the same way. But they also don't shy away from that either, because you do need to recognize that these things have happened. These very painful things have happened. And they do a real good job of that. Even the Hooded Justice might be the best origin story I've ever seen in my life. Like, he's literally just got finished being hung with the mask on, and even how they show that, because they show through his eyes. They don't show him really being hung. They show through his eyes what's going on. And he makes that decision that I still want to do this thing. And not necessarily, I don't know, the right thing. But I still want to do this. I still believe in this.
Well, he hasn't lost his concept of law and order, right? He's still the kid that believed in Bass Reeves.
Yeah.
And so I love the fact that, like, for those of you who aren't like pop culture junkies the way I am, you might not know that Bass Reeves was actually
Superman,
right. He was the Lone Ranger. The stories of the Lone Ranger are based off the exploits of Bass Reeves.
Yeah.
So I love how it was kind of like, because look, typical comic book fans always complain, oh, you're taking a character from the 1940s that was white and now you're making it a minority character. So I love the fact that the story's grounded on, you had Bass Reeves, who's a historical figure, who's transformed into the Lone Ranger for pop culture purposes to make the character palatable. And now we're taking Hooded Justice, who was the one character who we were never really sure who he was. And now we're saying, oh, so the origin of all the superheroes in this universe, now we're back, then now it's Hooded Justice. And so I loved the way, if you can't tell, I'm a history buff, and I graduated with a political science degree, which is the reason why I do all this. But I loved that aspect of it, where we're playing with reality and while we're playing with the story at the same time. But to your point, I mean, he never loses his sense of law and order, even amongst all of this.
Yeah, especially when he burns down that Cyclops.
We're gonna get there. Trust me, we're gonna have a long conversation about that. Before we move on, I wanted to hear your thoughts as well.
I think that the show handles race really well. I agree with Najee about the fact that they don't. I feel like they're careful in trying not to re-traumatize people and doing things that just feel like they're solely there for shock value. But they are true to what actually took place. You can see in the Tulsa massacre scenes that these people are clearly not surviving what's happening.
Right.
But you are not like watching, you know, the actual act take place. There were a few moments, like when Will is waking up from the accident at the end and he finds the baby and he's leaving the scene, and like you clearly see the lady's brains blown out and all that. But I feel like having those moments there are necessary in a sense, so it isn't so watered down, because I feel like that is how injustice is allowed to just fester and grow, when we constantly gloss over things to make it
sanitizing.
yeah. So I feel like those moments are necessary, but I do appreciate that it's not just completely overdone.
I mean, the other thing I want to say about racism was the fact that I was amazed that they managed to include, you know, the straight old school racism of our parents' generation, but also the much more nuanced, like, look, you have your Chief Judd, whereas I can come in your house and hug you, I can have a glass of wine with you, but I don't. I think you're a human being. I don't really believe that we're on the same level, and I love that, because it's the same thing with what Hooded Justice experienced as a police officer, which is initially it's like okay, I understand there's a certain degree of discrimination I'm going to experience. The chief of police isn't going to shake my hand and wish me good luck. That's fine. They're going to bring in a black captain to do it. But it's when he brings in that member of Cyclops, and he doesn't realize, he's like, oh, and everybody's showing him respect up front, like, oh, you're gonna apologize to our fellow officer.
Microaggressions,
right? And so I love how it's like, this is what racism functions like in the real world as a person of color. It's chess, where everybody knows the pieces you have and you don't know their pieces, because you can't tell the good guys versus the bad. There's a joke that Muhammad Ali told, I think it was on the Dick Cavett show, where guys complain like, oh, well, you're a racist, or you just don't believe in the general decency of white America. He's like, no. He's like, I think that if there were 5,000 snakes at your door, and 4,000 of them were good, but 1,000 were bad, would you hold the door open for everybody to come in, or would you close the door and be like, I'm gonna go on a one-by-one basis and be really careful with it?
Yeah.
And so I felt like most times when I see pop culture deal with race, it is in a very, it is a very ham-fisted, unelegant, unnuanced way. And it's kind of like, look, if we were still at the point where it was kind of like, and someone got lynched today on Georgia Avenue, it would be easy for all of us to deal with racism, because it would be a pure life or death issue. It's the microaggressions. It's the not being able to advance in life, despite being equally talented for mysterious reasons. And I kind of felt like all of that got touched on in a meaningful way. Switching over to Hooded Justice, because we talked about him a little bit. I can't believe that they get. First off, doing a black and white episode of anything in the color era, I know somebody had to sign off like, we're gonna do a black and white episode, like the whole episode. But what they did with that character, so we're gonna deep dive for a second. I hope nobody gets upset. So look, the idea of masks within masks within masks. So you have a character where he can't be who he is in terms of his sexuality, because it can't be embraced in the time period that he's living in. He can't embrace who he is as a black man, because he can't get the respect that he thinks that he's entitled to. He can't manage his rage, and he's not honest with his partner. So it's like, we always keep making Batman analogies, but it's kind of like Batman on steroids. It's like Bruce Wayne, where there is no Alfred, there is no counterbalance. It's all of the trauma, all of it, having to manage all of it without having a single human being to confide in. And so I thought it was amazing that when we get to Captain Metropolis, and it's even where you think there will be shelter and places of acceptance, really there isn't either. So, I was going to say Najee, but I keep starting with you. Pete, what'd you think? I know, right? Such an easy, lighthearted topic.
This show handles the gaps of the graphic novel so well. Of like, here's a character we don't know anything about, and we're going to fill it with something that makes sense for the audience, and also makes, as far as reality is concerned, and also makes sense for like the world that we put it into. I think of masks. I also think of Dr. Manhattan wearing his own mask
at the bar in Vietnam.
But that's how I'm showing up from now on. The mask of myself, just
the mask of myself. I don't know. It's just something that the show does really well. Is showing you somebody's truth and then showing you what amount of truth they allow the rest of the world to see. And every single one of those characters has something like that going on. And as an audience member, I feel like it's really valuable to see that from a storytelling perspective, because it's like we know what certain characters are holding back, or we know that they are, and that we're about to find out. And so that to me has been like one of the most rewarding parts of the show.
I thought it was really interesting that they had Looking Glass be the one watching the episode with Hooded Justice and Captain Metropolis. It took me back to the moment where the girl has him in the House of Mirrors in the beginning, and she steals his clothes. And I'm like, I felt like in that moment he was that young boy again, like just transported back to this time where he's like completely just at the mercy of someone else's like sexual comfort or exploration or whatever. He's just stuck like a deer in headlights. Just like that moment, he sat there and watched the show in exactly the same way. And I just thought it was great to show continuity. Like, even though he's been through all of these things, at heart he's really still this young boy who really is not sure about what's happening around him. And then in the instance of him having all these masks, I love that they had the lady from the 7th Cavalry. Like, it's not that she like intuitively saw right through him. Like, she really just had all this information because, you know, we're in your walkie, we're EDS, we're sending you all this stuff, we're sending you your reflector team, we know about your hats. Like, it makes you stop to think. To me, it actually made me kind of nervous because all humans have masks in real life, and it made me think about like, well, how are there any of my masks that somebody else out there knows about or like, you know, are pulling the strings on? So I thought that was a really cool way for them to come at that topic and make people think, should they choose to, because that could be kind of uncomfortable.
Najee? They say we always meet someone's representative. We don't necessarily meet them. And we tend to wear a bunch of different hats and a bunch of different masks with different people. You know, and what they did with Hooded Justice, like Julian said, he's Superman and Batman, and rolled into one. And now you have this guy who has to operate in so many different spaces at the same time, because he is, I guess, is a bi black man, because he, you know, a lot of times we erase people being bi, but he is a man who is of the LGBT community, and also a black man, and also a police officer in a very racist time, which is always all the time. And he's also a dad. And he has to wear all these different hats, all these different masks at the same time. And you find out, it's like, all right, I want to be able to do this. And then the first thing, when he's trying to be a police officer, old boy is like, hey, man. Matter of fact, before we get to that, his soon-to-be wife is like, "Hey, you sure you want?" Because you're an angry man, right? Her comment is, "You have a gun and you have a nightstick, and I'm worried about what you're gonna do with it." Now, my only problem with the whole thing behind the rage was it's kind of like, isn't some of the rage justified? But like, go ahead. This is the thing with that though, because he can't necessarily see it. Yeah, it'll be justified. Right, if he buys you, just but she's outside of it, and her one in the same ways that we get Angela in the future trying to protect Cal is the same way. It's like, you sure you want to do this? Because what you have is very different. You could be angry, but you're not allowed to be white people angry. You know, you angry. I mean, but you're not allowed to be white people angry. You know, and that can get you in trouble, and not just you, but me and everybody in our community fucked up because you're angry. And even when you see that, like, you start with her telling him, hey, you might not want to do that. And then he's at graduation, and the dude's like, hey, you wear the Cyclops, because they white folks don't play fair. So speaking of the Cyclops, again, as a history buff, COINTELPRO, that was the first thing that popped in my head when I saw the projectors. For anyone who doesn't know, I'm going to bore you. So,
back in the 1970s, late 1970s, there was this wonderful thing.
oldie days.
This is wonderful thing called the Church Committee, which if you don't know, you can actually go watch the hearings on YouTube. And Magic, can you go flip the little calendar thing off my phone? Because internet, I apologize if you're seeing like the shadow of a calendar invite. They're not okay. Good. It was just my own paranoia. But so long story short, so the Church Committee reveals that there was an FBI program called COINTELPRO, which was a counterintelligence program targeting what was considered to be the New Left at the time. So I should say, ironically, the files themselves were discovered because during the original Ali Frazier fight, a group of activists broke into a local FBI office because they knew that everybody was watching the fight. And that's how they got the files. And so we became of the aware fact that the federal government had actively worked over the course of multiple decades to sow dissent within the black community against each other. So you had stuff like Jeff Fort and the Blackstone Rangers in Chicago being set at odds with the Black Panther Party because the FBI is sending letters saying, "Well, we're the Panthers and we're planning on killing you." And so when I saw that, I was like, "Oh, so this is a plot that's actually it's not that entirely far-fetched because there were episodes of factional warfare between groups because they were being incited to attack each other."
There's something in that, right? That when they go through the black and white episode, we get to the Will Reed story, right? There's a signal, though. You know, the Cyclops signal is the OK symbol. Also the racist symbol. I was like, no, so they just gonna give it all the way to
right. That was the only time that the show veered into the we're gonna make a pure political comment about right now. Because I saw it and I was like, I paused it and I read it. I was like, did I really see that? I was like, oh, I said HBO must not have cared about the hate mail that was coming from journalists. There's gonna be some consequences. Richard Spencer is not gonna be happy.
Man, he get punched again.
Oh, yeah.
And Sonic rings every time.
I prefer Street Fighter.
Look, I just need.
But no. So I feel like I give them a lot of credit because I think even for people of color to write any story involving racism, seeing it and we're navigating it to try to do that topic justice, I think it's challenging for anybody. I mean, to our previous conversations, to the degree in which Marvel failed with Black Panther in terms of how they set up those two.
So much. So much.
So
Black Panther.
So I mean, I give Watchmen credit. I give Watchmen credit for how it handled the topic, and for the complexity in which it handled it. Because I mean, we're talking about an incredibly dense comic book, and they succeeded in making an incredibly dense television show.
They also let him kill those people. He didn't leave anyone alive. Look, like literally, even in the most recent episode, when Angela tells him about Judd, the first thing Will does is like, okay, I'm going to Tulsa. I'm hanging this man. There's no it's like, someone's alive? Oh no, this got to go. And I appreciate that because a lot of times we get these stories where it's like, oh, we'll leave this one person alive. You got to dead that where it is. And I appreciate that, but go ahead.
No, so I mean, I wanted, because we're starting to get short on time. So I wanted to talk about where are we going from here? Because season 1, for those of you who are watching now, the season concludes tomorrow night at 9 p.m. With episode 9. So it's been a ride that we've been on. And where are we going? I'm just curious about your thoughts and predictions. I will put out my first prediction. I do believe Angela is about to become the next Dr. Manhattan.
Okay.
That's my hot take.
Okay.
So
Pete.
Well, now I don't even know what to think. I don't know. We're talking tragedy, so I feel like Dr. Manhattan's got to go. John's got to be gone. That's entirely possible. We haven't seen Owlman.
Yeah, don't know what happened to Dan.
We don't know what happened to him.
Or the lube guy. Where's Lube Man?
No!
He just slid in.
I will say that was a moment that I did not see coming. When he did it, I was like, that was a physical stunt. Somebody actually did that? Yeah.
I forgot that even happened.
That was crazy.
There's so much stuff going on.
Esther, that was for you.
I think what I'm excited about is the fact that we're not going to get anything wrapped up neat. Because there's so many open-ended storylines, so many organizations that and they're smart enough not to try to shut down all these major plot lines that aren't going to make sense in the one episode we have left. I think you know, I think we're probably going to hit a place where we could end on the same kind of cliffhanger that the graphic novel ended on, or we, you know, get a second season. Second of 3. I want 3 seasons, and then I'll be happy. That's all.
Honestly, like you was just saying, there's so much going on. I have no idea what is about to happen. Right, the Luke guy, like that was so bizarre.
If he ends up being an important part of the story, I would probably pass out.
What if it's all about him?
Oh God, that would
Second season.
Luke guy's really looking like
But
you don't know what's going on.
I don't. I do not. And I usually feel like I have a pretty good sense of the way a story is going, but I really don't. There's been so much that was surprising, like about the way that they've handled things, that I don't trust myself to make that kind of judgment yet.
Najee.
Everybody's gonna die.
Oh, boo! Yeah, I knew
everybody's gonna die except for Angela, and that's all that matters. No, where do I think we're going? Oh, again, we haven't. Well, no, we know that what's his name's in jail. Dan is in jail. Al guy is in jail. Al man is in jail. Night Owl.
Right, because the whole reason why Sally's participating is the possibility.
Yeah.
The senator dangled there like, hey, when I'm president, I get your owl out of his cage.
Yeah, and we don't necessarily know where Rorschach is. Like,
since the show follows the comic book and not the movie. Rorschach in the comic book was teleported someplace by John, and John's comment to
Rorschach might be on Mars.
I mean, he could be anywhere.
I thought he was going to be the game warden.
I did too. I did too. At this point, I was like, Rorschach could have been the Loop man. I was sitting back just waiting for him to pop up.
I mean, no.
I mean, Rorschach is a different kind of guy.
I mean, honestly, I hoped it ended with this season. To be perfectly honest with you, as much as I love a good show that lasts a little bit, I only sometimes want a condensed story. Give me 9 episodes. Let me question the rest of my life.
I don't want to be fleshed out. Like I think it really deserves to be.
I'll give you another reason why I say that, because David Lindelof is responsible for Lost, and after a certain.
Well, I mean, but in his defense, I don't think the fact that show continued that long was entirely within his control. I think ABC was kind of like,
hey, you want some more money?
Hey, remember, Lost was The Walking Dead before The Walking Dead. That was a show where it was kind of like, if you're an executive, you're an executive working for Disney. That's who ABC's owned by. And you're gonna go to Bob Iger and be like, we'd like to stop making money. Like you could go sit down someplace. There's one character we have not talked about at all that I feel like we would be remiss if we did not discuss before we left, and that's Adrian Veidt.
Adrian Veidt, yes.
So.
The man who wants to be a god.
Right, the man who wants to be a god and got a chance to be god and realized that he didn't like it. So the graphic novel ends with Ozymandias having allegedly saved the world. We all know that Rorschach's journal ends up in the hands of the New Frontier, which somehow I guess it didn't hit the press the way we thought it was going to.
Right.
It got suppressed enough that President Redford,
I'm waiting for Robert Redford
I did.
to show up as himself.
I mean, I'm waiting for that too. I mean, look, after the Winter Soldier, you can tell me that Alexander Pierce secretly was Robert Redford, secretly is. I believe all of it at this point. But so we know Adrian Veidt helped John lose his powers and memory to be with Angela for the last 10 years, and so he's functionally spent 10 years on Europa, in the paradise that Manhattan created, trying to build something that would reflect a better version of humanity. And Agent Veidt has been basically systematically killing it whenever he feels like, out of pure aggravation and spite, for 10 years, having left Earth because he was like, nobody acknowledges the fact that I saved everything, and they're ignoring all of my plans for the future. Basically, I want to go someplace where I'm appreciated. Be careful about what you ask for, because you might get it. I mean, so what did you guys think about Adrian Veidt and his shenanigans and the birthday cake? Why is it always a cake? He never asked for anything else.
It was so it made me think a lot about religion and people's concept of God, and like how I felt like they were poking so much fun at that. Like, look at your God, look at what he's doing. Like, this is how he feels about you. And then even in his conversation with the game warden, when he was like, your God's abandoned you, like you're pathetic. And even though he gets kicked in the face, the game warden's like, he's not lying. Like, we are pathetic. God's gone. Like, I felt like that was interesting commentary for them to just put out there like that so blatantly, and then to really be showing this man like fishing babies out of lakes, and this was too skinny. Just
like, look at this new gigabit.
Yeah, like, and and then the way he grows them up, like when they, I'm just gonna put you through this immense amount of trauma, and I'm gonna speed up the whole process, and then I'm gonna tell you how you should feel about it and how you should use that to interact with the rest of the world right when you're in your developmental stages. That to me was exactly what happens basically in organized religion a lot of times. Like, I'm gonna get you when you're at your most vulnerable, your most malleable, and probably subject you to some pretty harmful or painful stuff. Woo. And then I'm going to tell you exactly how you need to feel about it and how you should use that to navigate the world. And I'm going to throw you away from that.
Najee.
Ooh. See, I had this conversation earlier with my brother and a little bit with y'all, but a lot of times people think they want to be God until it's time to be God. People want to make decisions until it's time to make decisions. Yeah. And like a lot of times what I was talking about with my brother earlier is like, people look at God as a hero. Nothing in this is like, is he? Is God really a hero? Or it just is. And so like you get that challenge of that. Like Light is like, bro, like I can do whatever I want with y'all. Like even if I put me in jail, it ain't gonna matter. Y'all gonna break me out. I'm your God. I'm the only thing you have that gives you some type of hope, that gives you some type of care, or what you think is love and all that. I'm the only thing you have. Plus, that man kind of got something for Dr. Manhattan. He got a thing for him because he makes them go through that little play, and it's like,
I mean, there's a level of hatred and animosity, but it's also like besides love and affection. It's a strange relationship because besides Sally and Dan, Ozymandias and Dr. Manhattan, are the only like two people who have like a relationship. It's this strange thing where it's like Adrian is smart enough to be able to understand what John is going through and how he's living. He just hates that it's not him. And John is left with the only human being on this planet who has the remote capacity of understanding me, besides the women I fall in love with, is this one dude. And that's like his strange, destructive male platonic friendship where it's like they're frenemies. And so it's somehow John always manages to one up him, right? The original story ends, Adrian is isolated up in Antarctica, and John's like, I'm gonna go create life and go do my thing. You be here and chill with this. And they flip-flop. I'm coming back to Earth, you can go to Europa. And John's pretty consistently happy. John's like, hey, and Adrian is just like, it's funny. The one thing that this show did not lose is that you always have a thread where you kind of hope, but the character can't be that horrible. I went into the early episodes thinking they have to be robots because I just can't imagine Adrian would actually incinerate a human being. He's bad. And it's funny because I'm making the argument for somebody who killed 3 million people, and I'm like, well, he can't be that bad. I mean, killing people with which I would say the Looking Glass episode gave you, because we had never really had a clear indication of how bad it had. Right. The event. Yeah. What was it? They're calling it 9/12 or 9/2. I can't remember which one. 11/2. We didn't have how bad it was. When Looking Glass comes out of the glass house and that girl's on the ground, I was like, oh, that's what Adrian did. So I guess I shouldn't have been shocked when he set Phillips on fire. But I was just like, wow. I was like, there is such a strange sadomasochist. Like, I will have you dressed as your guy, and I'm gonna incinerate him right before you.
Even with them throwing the bodies up onto the...
Oh, you're right. I will use your dead bodies to write my name in the sky. Right. So yeah, I mean, it's just amazing because it's like it's people. It's funny. Adrian was somebody who tried to convince everybody of how superior his morality was. It was like, you just aren't capable of seeing the world on a high enough level. I'm trying to save everything, and it's like, the whole thing behind be careful of people who wear masks. Mm-hmm. Adrian, what he projects is a mask. And what you have to be fearful of, he doesn't actually care about humanity.
No.
He doesn't really care actually about anything but himself. And, you know, like going back to our original conversation before we got on, and the difference with the comedian and Sally is the fact that they very clearly see what humanity is. Sally's like, I just don't believe in heroics because I believe it's all an act, and it's mass, and it's foolishness.
I thought that was an interesting departure too from the movie, and having Dr. Manhattan be the one who actually has some type of care for humanity, and then you know, having Adrian Veidt be like so very clearly like indifferent, like he does not care. I don't even think, I mean, even though he sees humanity as pathetic, I don't really think he cares enough to hate humans. Like, he really sees you as completely insignificant.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was interesting to like have a different perspective on that, to say that, you know, just because Dr. Manhattan might be kind of separate from you, well, not kind of, might be separate from humanity, doesn't automatically make him, you know, indifferent or against it. But here you have a human being who has absolutely no respect for other human beings at all.
None. But he is funny though. I will tell you that letter he was writing to the game board, and that was hysterical. Believe it or not,
Scar.
Yes.
Scar as Adrian Veidt is wonderful.
So believe it or not, we're out of time.
Okay.
Which doesn't surprise me, seeing how we're trying to talk about a television show that's mirroring a comic book. That I've been reading Watchmen all week long, and I think I just got to the point where they arrested Rorschach. I'll be reading this book for the rest of next week, trying to read it and catch up. But thank you for joining us. This, of course, is Pop Culture Uncovered. We were broadcasting live from Fantom Comics here at 2010 P Street Northwest. Fantom, if you're watching now, is having a sale for the rest of the day. It's 15% off in store for the rest of the day. So this would be a great moment for you to come down and do some of your Christmas shopping. We'll be back next month to do yet another episode. I don't know what we'll be talking about yet, but if Najee's on it, then I'm sure it won't be quiet. So, for Pete, Shanda, yeah. Hopefully by next episode I will like develop the ability for normal human speech and not butcher her name. And
Black Manta and
Wakanda.
Understand. Also, Cal could have moved out of the way.
It's
saying that all week.
It's predestination. It's predestination. Don't start that. So as always,
It's cheap.
So as always, you can read our articles that we put up daily on popcultureuncovered.com. You can catch us on Twitter at @PCUncovered. Same thing on Instagram. I'm a Diesel Right. Can you stop trying to do sign language? I'm a Diesel Rights on Twitter. Thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate you and appreciate the support. Have a good one, and don't spoil the last episode for anybody. That would be wrong.